Kamala Harris did an exclusive interview with Fox News. I'm very pleased to see this because, again, it means that Kamala Harris isn't really afraid to put herself in a place where she might not really be liked that much, and that shows a lot of confidence. I really respect that. Trump, he can barely go on anything unless he's promised that it's just going to be a massive circle jerk slash stroking of his ego. So I'm happy to see Kamala Harris go on this interview to begin with. I have not yet seen it, so we'll have to go and watch it now and find out if it's any good. Now, the first one here is captioned that the Fox News host, his first question to Kamala Harris is about undocumented immigration, but he barely even lets her get a word in.
Yeah, that immigration is one of the key issues that they're looking at this election, and specifically the influx of illegal immigrants from more than 150 countries. How many illegal immigrants would you estimate your administration has released into the country over the last 3.5 years?
Well, I'm glad you raised the issue of immigration because I agree with you. It is a topic of discussion that people want to rightly have. And you know what I'm going to talk about.
Yeah, but
right
do you,
now,
just a number. Do you think it's 1 million, 3 million?
Brett, let's just get to the point. Okay, the point is that we have a broken immigration system that needs to be repaired.
So your Homeland Security Secretary said that 85% of...
Yeah, so he's really looking for a fight pretty much right off the bat, I would say. I mean, I get that he's trying to challenge her, and, you know, they probably think, like, the mainstream media never challenges Kamala, blah, 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 or something stupid like that, but he really is not doing a good job at the beginning here because it does feel like he's kind of just jumping down her throat every chance he gets. This is supposed to be an interview, after all, not a debate.
I'm not finished. We have an
It's a rough estimate of 6 million people have been released into the country. And let me just finish. I'll get to the question, I promise you.
Bro.
I was beginning to answer.
And when you came into office, your administration immediately reversed a number...
Dude, what? He literally gave her like 5 seconds of free time to talk, and then he's just shouting over her, trying to move on to the next topic? That's Fox News for you, I guess. They don't want to. They want to make sure that Kamala doesn't have too much time to start making sense to the majority of their viewers.
Of Trump border policies. Most significantly, the policy that required illegal immigrants to be detained through deportation, either in the U.S. or in Mexico. And you switched that policy. They were released from custody awaiting trial. So instead, included in those were a large number of single men, adult men, who went on to commit heinous crimes. So, looking back...
Again, I bring this study up all the fucking time whenever the subject of immigration comes up, but where the hell is he getting these numbers, and what exactly is he talking about? Because they have done multiple different studies and found consistently that illegal immigrants commit less violent crime in the U.S. compared to U.S.-born citizens. That is true. From 1990 to 2013, the undocumented immigration population quadrupled, or at least tripled, and we didn't see an increase in violent crime. In fact, we saw crime decrease during that time. When you show up saying, yeah, well, they let all these immigrants in, they committed heinous crimes, where? Can I have a number? Can I have a statistic? Not just one bad illegal immigrant that murdered somebody. Can I have a statistic, please, on them being more likely to commit violence or something?
Do you regret the decision to terminate Remain in Mexico at the beginning of your administration?
At the beginning of our administration, within practically hours of taking the oath, the first bill that we offered Congress, before we worked on infrastructure, before the Inflation Reduction Act, before the Chips and Science Act, before the bipartisan Safer Communities Act, the first bill, practically within hours of taking the oath, was a bill to fix our immigration system.
Yes, ma'am. It was called the U.S. Citizenship Act of 2021.
Exactly.
It was essentially a pathway to citizenship.
What the hell? Dude, let her finish answering, please. You're not in a fucking classroom, okay? You weren't just raising your hand and the teacher didn't just call on you and ask you to name the bill.
May I please finish?
Yes, ma'am.
May I finish responding, please? But you have to let me finish,
You
please.
had the White House and the Senate, and they didn't bring up that bill.
I'm in the middle of responding to the point you're raising,
Okay.
and I'd like to finish.
Yes, ma'am.
I appreciate that Kamala is really, really, really holding her ground here. That is admirable as well.
We recognized from day one that, to the point of this being your first question, it is a priority for us as a nation and for the American people. And our focus has been on fixing a problem. And from day one, then, we have done a number of things, including to address our asylum system and put more resources, getting more judges, what we needed to do to tighten up penalties and increase penalties for illegal crossings, what we needed to do to deal with points of entry between border entry points. That's the work we did, and we worked on supporting what was a bipartisan effort, including some of the most conservative members of the United States Congress, to actually strengthen the border.
I'm guessing that they're talking here about the border bill that they presented that would have put, what, 16,000 additional border agents on the border, and it was Trump who struck it down. It was Trump who advocated for everybody to vote against it. So here we are now continuing, and again, this is captioned how this host really does appear to be out for blood.
To the trafficking of drugs, guns, and human beings. And Donald Trump, but let me just finish.
Six Democrats voted against that bill.
Learned about that bill and told them to kill it because he preferred to run on a problem instead of fixing a problem. And in this election, this is rightly a discussion that the American people want to have. And what they want are solutions, and they want a president of the United States who's not playing political games with the issue,
I hear you,
but actually is focused on fixing it.
Six Democrats voted against that bill. It would have allowed 1.8 million illegal immigrants into the country a year. A lot of conservatives had a problem with it. These are the six Democrats. But more importantly...
What is he getting at here? A couple Democrats also voted against it? Okay. This is a bill that would have strengthened the border. Trump shot it down. Trump proposes adding 10,000 Border Patrol agents after derailing a bipartisan border bill. He did defy the union earlier this year when he convinced Republicans to kill a bipartisan immigration bill that contained additional border resources. According to the White House, the bill would have funded 1,500 personnel at U.S. Customs and Border Protection, which includes the Border Patrol. Trump at the time said he did not want to give Democrats a political victory on his key issue. At the rally, Trump contended the legislature was a horrible bill. He just didn't want them to have any kind of victory on this issue because Trump would have rather ran on fear-mongering about illegal immigration. That's fucking lovely.
Jocelyn Nungari, Rachel Morin, Laken Riley, they are young women who were brutally assaulted and killed by some of the men who were released at the beginning of the administration, well before a negotiated bipartisan...
Again, I literally knew they were going to do this. First of all, it's terrible what happened to those poor innocent women, of course. But are we really going to pretend like white men don't also murder innocent women all the fucking time? What's the murder rate of undocumented immigrants relative to legal citizens? It's a hell of a lot lower.
Bill. Former President Clinton actually referred to Laken Riley Sunday campaigning for you in Georgia, saying if those men had been properly vetted, Laken Riley probably would not have been killed. So if it wouldn't have happened, this is well before any negotiation. This is well before Donald Trump got involved in the politics. This is a specific policy decision by your administration to release these men into the country. So what I'm saying to you, do you owe
Brett,
those families an apology?
Let me just say, first of all, those are tragic cases. There's no question about that. There is no question about that. And I can't imagine the pain that the families of those victims have experienced for a loss that should not have occurred. So that is true. It is also true that if a border security had actually been passed 9 months ago, it would be 9 months that we would have had more border agents at the border, more support for the folks who are working around the clock trying to hold it all together.
Madam Vice President.
To ensure that no future harm would occur. And this
is a good point, and I think that this is kind of a smart strategy she's taking here, rather than saying like, well, I didn't mean to let them in, or that happened under Biden, blah, blah, because like there's something to be said also, things happening under Biden, like how much impact does the vice president really have? Really? Like them acting like this is all Kamala's fault all of a sudden is a little bit silly. But instead of even any of that, I'm really happy to see how she just turned that around entirely.
And this election in 20 days will determine whether we have a president of the United States who actually cares more about fixing a problem, even if it is not to their political advantage in an election, because there was a solution, Brett.
So far, Kamala is doing absolutely excellent. I mean, I know we're only watching it for a few minutes so far, but still, this is just, she's doing really, really well so far. She's managed to avoid a lot of his argumentative, confrontational approaches. She's managed to turn the conversation back around to solidify her point and how Trump was actually responsible for screwing a lot of this up. And she also did a good job at not even necessarily engaging too much in a lot of these little gotcha points that he kept making. You know, that there are these poor people that died. You let them in. Instead of even engaging with that, she was just like, hey, what happened was terrible. We wanted to do a solution. We offered a solution. Trump shot it down. Next up, it says the first 10 minutes of this interview are him just trying to score gotchas on Harris on immigration.
Look back at what you said in 2019 when you first ran for president. And there have been changes, and you've talked about some of them. When it comes to immigration, you supported allowing immigrants in the country illegally to apply for driver's license, to qualify for free tuition at universities, to be enrolled in free health care. Do you still support those things?
Listen, that was 5 years ago, and I'm very clear that I will follow the law. I have made that statement over and over again, and as Vice President of the United States, that's exactly what I've done, not to mention before.
If that's the case, you chose a running mate, Tim Walz, governor of Minnesota, who signed those very things into state law. So do you support that?
We are very clear, and I am very clear, as is Tim Walz, that we must support and enforce federal law, and that is exactly what we will do.
Yeah, she's talking about federal law. He just asked a question about Tim Walz installing a state law. She's being very clear here that federally, we support the law federally. You cannot federally just make it legal now for any undocumented immigrant to obtain a driver's license. But on state-by-state basis, you can. And also, again, I will just say this. Undocumented immigrants, say what you will about them, I don't really care. They commit significantly less crime, they pay more in social services than they take out, and they significantly and greatly stimulate our economy. Immigrants, whether they are undocumented or not, do a net benefit for this country.
This is a time when voters, especially here in Pennsylvania, are inundated with commercials and ads. They just want it to stop because it's every commercial. But many of them add noise, but a few of them seem to break through. This particular one from the Trump campaign has gotten a lot of attention.
Kamala supports taxpayer-funded sex changes for prisoners.
Surgery.
For prisoners.
For prisoners. Every transgender inmate in the prison system would have access.
Wow. Oh my goodness. For all the pressing matters of today's world, thank you, Fox News, for bringing up this random clip from God knows when about taxpayer-funded gender transitions for prison inmates. Can we find out the proportion of inmates that are even claiming to be trans? How many inmates would you really see even getting this surgery? Second of all, why are they inmates? What was the crime they committed? Just if you've committed a crime doesn't mean your identity is somehow invalid. This clip even says just receiving treatment. Not even the clip you showed has anything to do with putting men in women's prisons, quote unquote, or anything like this.
So are you still in support of using taxpayer dollars to help prison inmates or detained illegal aliens to transition to another gender?
I will follow the law, and it's a law that Donald Trump actually followed. You're probably familiar with, now it's a public report, that under Donald Trump's administration, these surgeries were available on a medical necessity basis to people in the federal prison system. And I think, frankly, that ad from the Trump campaign is a little bit of like throwing, stones when you're living in a glass house.
The Trump aides say that
under Trump, U.S. prisons offer gender-affirming care. The New York Times report undercuts a major argument the Trump campaign had been pushing on the campaign trail. The Trump administration offered gender-affirming care for inmates in U.S. prisons who requested it. According to the New York Times, the Bureau of Prisons under Trump spent between $60,000 to $95,000 per year on hormone therapy for inmates, and there were 2 known surgeries approved via court action during his 4 years in office. While these numbers are relatively small on the campaign trail, the Trump campaign is focused on attacking Vice President Kamala Harris, arguing that she supports taxpayer-funded transgender surgeries for prisoners in the Bureau of Prisons. But Trump has literally done the exact same fucking thing. I'm sorry, but this does not sound like a big problem to me. If you're in prison, you're also deserving of care, of proper care needed. Trump even followed through with this, and now Trump is trying to attack Kamala for continuing the exact same thing?
He never advocated for that prison policy, and no gender transition surgeries
you know what? You got to take responsible for what happened in your administration.
That's a lie. He said no gender transitions happened when he was president. There were 2 known surgeries approved via court action during his 4 years in office. There were 2. And Fox News just lied and said that there were none.
Yeah, no surgeries happened in this presidency.
It's in black and white.
Would you still advocate for using taxpayer dollars for gender reassignment surgeries?
I will follow the law, just as I think Donald Trump would say he did.
You would have a say as president.
Like I said, I think it's he spent $20 million on those ads, trying to create a sense of fear in the voters because he actually has no plan in this election that is about focusing on the needs of the American people. Whereas, at $20 million on that ad, on an issue that, as it relates to the biggest issues that affect the American people, it's really quite remote. And again, his policy was no different. Look at where we are, though.
They say
on plans for the American people, I'm offering a plan to deal with affordable housing. I'm offering a plan to deal with what we need to do to strengthen small business.
I know that people are going to disagree. However, I think that Kamala Harris right here absolutely did phenomenally well. I like that, again, she pulled the gotcha on him. She brought up how Trump does the same shit. And then she just moved the conversation. She forced the conversation to move. She's absolutely cooking. She is cooking him, man.
Businesses, which are the backbone of America's economy. I am offering a plan that is about taking care of young parents and giving them the support they need. My plans for the economy will strengthen the economy, as have been reviewed by 16 Nobel laureates, Goldman Sachs, Moody's, and recently the Wall Street Journal, which have all studied our plans and have indicated my plans for our economy would strengthen our economy, his would make them weaker, would ignite inflation and invite a recession by the...
Oh man, now she's just schooling him with straight fucking facts. Goldman Sachs said her economic plan was better for the economy compared to Trump's. Economists say inflation deficits will be higher under Trump than Harris. In a Wall Street Journal survey, economists see Donald Trump's plans as more inflationary by a larger margin than in July when President Biden was on the ticket. Wow, so another one. So now we have Goldman Sachs and another survey of multiple different economists all coming out in favor of Kamala's plan and shitting all over Trump's plan.
Why do you think more people say they trust him on the economy than they trust you?
I think that when you look at...
Probably because 2 things. One, the thing Kamala can't say, the average American voter is fucking stupid beyond belief, okay? And 2, because people are stupid beyond belief, they see the economy during Trump and they feel like the economy was good. Then COVID happens. They somehow forget all about COVID and think that all this economy issue must just be the fault of Biden or Harris or something. And now, even over the past 12 months, wages have surpassed inflation and still they're complaining about the economy. The economy is still not perfect, but acting as though Joe Biden somehow messed up the economy is not true. The economy got screwed up because of COVID. Even when you talk about gas prices were already starting to really increase when Trump was still president because of COVID. COVID obviously threw a wrench in the overall economy. However, now things are already getting back on track, and like I said, wages have surpassed inflation. Inflation is going back down, and it's my understanding that the past couple months, inflation has been below the Fed's 0.2% goal. So we are going in a positive direction, and all of this is a good thing.
At an analysis of our plans for what we would do as President of the United States, it has been clear to those who study and understand how economic policy works that moving forward, because I do believe the American people are ready to...
Oh, excuse me. The Fed's goal is 2%, not 0.2%. Okay, thank you for correcting me on that. But yeah, it's my understanding that the past couple months, inflation has been right around the 2% mark, which is the Fed's inflation goal.
Are ready to turn the page on the divisiveness and the type of rhetoric that has come out of Donald Trump. People are ready to chart a new way forward, and they want a president who has a plan for the future and a plan that is sound and will strengthen our country. My plan for the economy does exactly that. His plan would be, again, to give tax cuts to billionaires and the biggest corporations in our country and blow up our...
She is really selling herself to a Republican audience here, and I think she's doing a really good job. Of course, there's going to be that bunch of Fox News viewers that are just like, anything Kamala Harris says, I just ignore it. And if you're at that point, again, you're stupid. But people that are actually open-minded enough so to have like introspection and be willing to examine the facts instead of hiding from them, this might very well sway a couple people.
But nothing comes to mind that you would do differently?
Let me be very clear. My presidency will not be a continuation of Joe Biden's presidency. And like every new president that comes into office, I will bring my life experiences, my professional experiences, and fresh and new ideas. I represent a new generation of leadership. I, for example, am someone who has not spent the majority of my career in Washington, D.C. I invite ideas, whether it be from the Republicans who are supporting me, who were just on stage with me minutes ago, and the business sector, and others who can contribute to the decisions that I make about, for example, my plan for increasing the supply of housing in America and bringing down the cost of housing, addressing the issue of...
What she's doing here is super, super smart. She's literally acknowledging that this is not going to be the same thing. She brings something different to the table, and what that is that because she's young and a fresh face, she also is able to get ideas from different places instead of just being a career politician, stuffy up in their office in Washington all day. Instead, she actually has experience, life experience, going out meeting people. Kind of sounds pretty similar to what Trump said about how he would surround himself with the best people. Only Trump said it like a drunk uncle, and Kamala is making a hell of a lot more sense.
Addressing the issue of small businesses, which is about working with the private sector to bring more capital and access to capital to our small business leaders, including my plan for
Joe Biden.
Again, she's listing off a plan, not just a concept of a plan, a plan. It's still not that great. I mean, it's still a little bit wishy-washy, but for the caption here on Fox News to say same difference is kind of silly. I mean, Kamala's clearly different than Biden, and she just gave an example as to how that is.
Heard a lot about those plans in recent days. Your campaign slogan is a new way forward, and it's time to turn the page. You've been vice president for 3.5 years, so what are you turning the page from?
Well, first of all, turning the page from the last decade in which we've been burdened with the kind of rhetoric coming from Donald Trump that has been designed and implemented to divide our country and have Americans literally point fingers at each other. Rhetoric and an approach to leadership that suggests that the strength of a leader is based on who you beat down instead of what we all know. The strength of leadership is based on who you lift up. The strength of an American president, which is one who understands that the vast majority of us have more in common than what separates us.
Madam Vice President, more than 70% of people
that is about turning the page on rhetoric that people are frankly exhausted of, Brett.
What a weird thing to ask a question about. I feel, well, you know, and I don't want to go that far, but I just feel like this is, of all the things, again, to ask her about, what are you turning the page from exactly?
They say the country is on the wrong track. If it's on the wrong track, that track follows 3.5 years of you being vice president and President Biden being president. That is what they're saying, 79% of them. Why are they saying that? If you're
the Fox News poll,
turning the page. You've been in office for 3.5 years.
She literally is saying she wants to turn the page, quote unquote, and move forward from how divided this country has become from Trump. Saying just, you've been president for the last 3 years. You want to turn the page from that? Like, she's obviously talking a little bit bigger than that. But again, these conservatives are playing obtuse, I think, to be bad faith.
And Donald Trump has been running for office.
But you've been the person holding the office.
Come on.
Madam
You
Vice
and I
President.
both know what I'm talking about. You and I both know what I'm talking about.
I actually don't. What are you talking about?
What I'm talking about is that over the last decade,
But
people
you're the
have
lever of
become.
power.
But listen, over the last decade, it is clear to me, and certainly the Republicans who are on stage with me, the former chief of staff to the president, Donald Trump, former defense secretaries, national security advisor, and his vice president. One, that he is unfit to serve, that he is unstable, that he is dangerous, and that people are exhausted with someone who professes to be a leader who spends full time demeaning and engaging in personal grievances and it being about him
Madam
instead
Vice
of
President,
the American people. People are tired of that.
I don't have anything to say about her answers. Her answers seem pretty solid. People are sick and tired of how divisive this country has gotten. People are tired of that. People do want to turn the page away from this. People do want to move forward. Next, this caption says that the interviewer tries to bait Harris into saying something bad about Trump supporters, but she has a great response.
Supposed to be a
So are
cakewalk
they misguided, the
for
50%?
Listen,
Are they stupid? What is
God,
it?
I would never say that about the American people. And in fact, if you listen to Donald Trump, if you watch any of his rallies, he's the one who tends to demean and belittle and diminish the American people. He's the one who talks about an enemy within, an enemy within, talking about the American people, suggesting he would turn the American military on the American people.
We asked that question.
Supposed to be a cake.
Yeah, that was a really, really great answer. So he clearly tries to bait her here, but instead she literally doubles down and is like, oh, I would never say that about people. But Trump has. Everything they're trying to bait Kamala into doing, Trump's already done. Next, Kamala Harris calls out Bret Baier, the interviewer, for playing a deceptive clip regarding the enemy within.
That question to the former president today. Harris Faulkner had a town hall, and this is how he responded.
I heard about that. They were saying I was like threatening. I'm not threatening anybody. They're the ones doing the threatening. They do phony investigations. I've been investigated more than Alphonse Capone. He was the greatest gangster. No, it's true. No, but think of it. It's called weaponization of government. It's a terrible thing.
So,
Brett, I'm sorry, and with all due respect, that clip was not what he has been saying about the enemy within that he has repeated when he's speaking about the American people. That's not what you just showed.
he was asked about that specific...
No, that's not what you just showed. In all fairness and respect to you.
That was the question that we asked him.
You didn't show that, and here's the bottom line. He has repeated it many times, and you and I both know that.
Okay, so Trump has very clearly and consistently said that Democrats are the enemies from within, which is the exact kind of divisive and disgusting rhetoric that tears America apart rather than bringing people together, and it's the exact kind of rhetoric that Kamala Harris wants to turn the page from. The host, Harris Faulkner, had asked Trump about this, and Trump did then say, we have two enemies. We have the outside enemy, we have the enemy from within. So they just didn't show that part. That is very deceptive. I'm really glad that Kamala is just straight up calling Fox News out.
We have two enemies. We have the outside enemy, and then we have the enemy from within. And the enemy from within, in my opinion, is more dangerous than China, Russia, and all these countries, because if you have a smart president, he can handle them pretty easily. I got along great with all. I handled them. But the thing that's tougher to handle are these lunatics that we have inside, like Adam Schiff, Shifty Schiff. Think of this guy's going to be a senator.
So here's a part of Trump on Fox News, October 13th, saying the enemy within and all that cringe. Then we also saw a clip from the Faulkner sit down in which Trump continued to double down on it. Fox News is being super deceptive.
Should be willing to be able to handle criticism without saying he'd lock people up for doing it. And this is what is at stake, which is why you have someone like the former chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff saying what Mark Milley has said about Donald Trump being a threat to the United States of America.
He's quoted in the bubble.
Exactly. And not only that, let me play the rest of this clip as well, because Trump also goes on to how the military should be used.
We have some very bad people. We have some sick people, radical left lunatics. And I think they're and it should be very easily handled by, if necessary, by National Guard, or if really necessary, by the military.
So, yep. Okay, great. So Trump is not only now suggesting that there's the enemy from within, which is incredibly divisive, and plays right into what Kamala Harris was saying. He's now also saying that the enemy from within should be handled by the military, which again, he's now talking about turning the military on American citizens, which is an extremely fucking yikesy thing to do. And it's also an extremely yikesy thing to even suggest, Trump. So because Trump has arbitrarily decided that Democrats are the enemy from within, now he can arbitrarily decide that it's A-okay and moral to use the military against American citizens.
He's quoted in the Bob Woodward book that way, yes. Let me ask you this, Madam Vice President. You call Donald Trump.
The significance
you
of that.
call Donald Trump.
I'm glad that she brought that up too. Don't try to diminish that. Exactly. What Trump is saying here is dangerous. So to act as though, well, Trump just meant this, or it was just a silly little goofy comment, or LOL, whatever. She was totally right for calling them out on trying to just brush over it. Because that's a significant, serious problem. If a Democrat ever suggested using the military against Republicans or gun owners or something, Republicans would be up in arms about how this Democrat's an evil fascist. Next, she is asked about Biden's mental decline.
You say now
He's unstable. He is unstable, Brett.
He's not well. You say he's mentally not stable.
He's not stable.
Let me ask you this. You told many interviewers that Joe Biden was on his game, that ran around circles on his staff. When did you first notice that President Biden's mental faculties appeared diminished?
Joe Biden, I have watched from the Oval Office to the Situation Room. And he has the judgment and the experience to do exactly what he has done in making very important decisions on behalf of the American people.
There were no concerns raised?
Brett, Joe Biden is not on the ballot.
I understand.
And Donald Trump
but
is.
You talked about it.
And Donald Trump
After George Clooney said within a few minutes of talking to President Biden at a fundraiser that he thought this was not the same Joe Biden that we saw on the debate stage.
Donald Trump is on the ballot.
I understand. You met with him at least once a week for 3.5 years. You didn't have any concerns?
This is really ironic considering Trump is actually the one who didn't release his medical stuff. Even Fox News posts, more than 230 doctors and healthcare professionals call on Trump to release medical records. Over the weekend, the White House released medical records for Vice President Kamala Harris, with her physician describing her as being in excellent health. Meanwhile, former President Donald Trump has yet to release his medical records, despite promising numerous times to do so. Trump previously released the results of a physical exam and memos on his health from his personal physicians. Simmons detailed Harris's most recent physical exam, which was in April 2024. He said the results were unremarkable. The doctor also said he found her routine blood work was unremarkable, though he noted that her vitamin D levels were in the insufficient range. So, Trump, meanwhile, released the most comprehensive results of a physical exam back in January 2018, conducted by congressman and White House physician. During the physical, Trump was described as having high cholesterol, a high body mass index, and a chronic skin condition that causes flushing or redness in the face. At the time, the former president was said to be taking a drug to lower cholesterol. The state of Harris's health was not known prior to the release of her medical records, but few questions were left unanswered after the report. Because Trump hasn't released more detailed medical reports since his first physical as president in 2018, it's unclear if he currently suffers from any seasonal allergies or if he has any family history of medical conditions. So it's really funny that they're questioning her first about Biden. Biden's not running for president, so what the fuck does that have to do with anything? Second of all, they're questioning her about Biden's cognitive abilities. Meanwhile, it's Trump. It's his cognitive abilities that are still kept in the dark from all of us. And he's actually running. He's actually on the ticket.
I think the American people have a concern about Donald Trump, which is why the people who know him best, including leaders of our national security community, have all spoken out, even people who worked for him in the Oval Office, worked with him in the Situation Room, and have said he is unfit and dangerous and should never be president of the United States again, including his former vice president, which is why the job was open for him to choose another running mate. So that is a fact.
That's all true, by the way. Virtually all of Trump's allies have pretty much turned on him now and have said that Trump's just ridiculous.
Critics just say that you either relaxed or failed to enforce sanctions on Iran, allowing all of this money to flow into Iran, like billions.
Let's go back to Donald Trump, who pulled out of a deal that would have actually put Iran in check.
The estimates in billions.
It was during Donald Trump's administration.
Why is the Republicans so stupid about this fucking Iran nuclear deal? What happened is there were assets, part of the Iranian economy, that were seized and frozen by the U.S. government. The U.S. government said, if you agree to not make nuclear weapons and allow us to make sure you're not making nuclear weapons in the future, we will unfreeze your assets and allow your economy to continue flowing. This was actually a pretty smart and strategic deal, and it even worked, as we did see a reduction in Iran trying to build nuclear weapons and things of this nature. So them just talking about, well, Iran got a lot of money, okay, how many nuclear bombs did they build? Did they reinstate the Iran deal? Is that why? Because them unfreezing the Iranian assets so that Iran doesn't make nuclear weapons seems like a pretty reasonable thing. The United States withdrew from the pact in 2018, and new sanctions were imposed. Under the Iranian agreement, Iran agreed to eliminate its stockpile of medium enriched uranium, cut its stockpile of low enriched uranium by 98%, and reduce by about 2/3 the number of its gas centrifuges for 13 years. So yeah, they were literally able to install like surveillance and everything, and all of that shit just didn't work out because of Trump.
That Iran regime, that we had an American military base that was attacked, where American soldiers suffered traumatic brain injuries, and Donald Trump dismissed them as headaches, not to mention how Donald Trump has treated and talked about America's military and military service people, calling them suckers and losers,
Hamas,
has diminished the significance.
We're talking over each other. I apologize.
I would like that we would have a conversation that is grounded in full assessment of the facts, which includes, I think this interview is supposed to be about the choices that your viewers should be presented about this election, and the contrast is important.
Yes, ma'am.
And on the subject of Iran, I am offering what should be an important contrast that is presented for folks to make a decision that they feel.
Who look at what the administration did and say and think differently. Madam Vice
Just saying, and there are critics that think different. Okay. And apparently that's it for the interview. Wow. I like the top comment. The interview shows what it's like to be a woman and talked over. Yeah, I have to say, this was a really solid performance for Kamala Harris. She did a great job at standing her ground, refusing to let this Fox News host dominate the conversation. And she literally managed to not even get put on the defensive, even though he was throwing a bunch of cheap gotchas at her. So all in all, I'd say Kamala did really great here, and anyone else saying otherwise is probably just coping. If you want to support the channel, please consider becoming a member today. Members get early access to videos, access to all the stream VODs, and exclusive access to emotes as well. So if you'd like to support the channel, become a member today.